Hello friends, and this is Ashton here, and in this part, which is part B for the live coding project 11, so we are building a web application with a router and a state management tool here. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to add authentication to your application like this. And at the last of this video, you should be able to build a login page here. So if I try to add email address here and enter password, wrong password, first try. So you got this animation and you got this pop-up message for invalid credentials. So yeah, if I pass a correct password, and it's going to log me in, and it's bring me to the application. And if you already checked my first part of this project, and you see we have the home page, about page, and dark mode, which is basically built in part A, okay? And if you didn't check that, you can go through that part A video and you can start. Basically, this video is based on the part A, and in part A, we only add the authentication to this application, okay? And we also add a logout function here, as you can see. If I try to log out this application, so we can log out. So I'm going to show you this step by step, so you can follow the video and try it yourself. This is a preview about the part A, okay? So if you haven't checked the part A of this project, and then this is a very quick preview at part A. So let me show you. So in part A, what we did here is basically build the basic structure of a web application in Google Apps Script. And since we're using Vue in this project, so we add a Vue library, and we also add the Vuetify as a CSS library, and we use Vuex and Vue router. So basically, we add all the libraries or tools we are going to use in our part A. So we have we have a application template like this. So we have some browsers to navigate the pages like this, and we have a navigation bar, and we can toggle the light mode and dark mode. So we have the basic structure of this application. So in our part B, I'm going to add the core, I think, most important functionality, which is authentication. So I'm going to add a login view here, so you can log in. And we're going to protect. I'm going to add a guard. So all of this content should not be accessible if you are not logged in. Okay, so we're going to add the authentication to this application in part B. Okay, so let's get started. And first of all, I need to make a copy of the part A, so we can start work on this new file and add the code for our part B. So let me move this folder, not the folder, this new file to the project folder. And thinking this one, YouTube, live coding. Okay, move it here. So go back and rename this file. And so this is for part B. Okay. So you open this file, and first you need to deploy this application since this is a new project. Okay, so let me do this. For the first revision, I'm going to change it to dev for the description and execute as me, and anyone should have the access and deploy it. And okay, so it's done here. So we have a URL to this application, and I'd like to change this name to part B, so we can tell the difference between the part A and part B. And if I reload this page, it's not showing because we needed to have a test URL. We can use this one. So we can have part B here, and okay, no change here, but we can have a part B here. So this is the first step, basically to make a copy of the part A, and we can start work on the project. And for part B, and we can start working on the authentication for this project. Okay. Okay, so to add the authentication to our project, and the first step we need to do in our code, so basically we need to have a login view, right? So here in this application right now, we have a home view and we have an about view. So basically we have two views. So basically I'd like to add a new view, or we can change this about view to login view, something like that. So to do that, you need to go to the routers. So all your views should be handled here. So let's make a copy of this about view and change it to, I'd like to change this one, okay, this one to login view. So basically this is a view name here. You can rename it. Basically you select the name you like. Okay, so for me just name it login view. And here I'd like to make a copy of this row, so I'd like to give it a pass for login and change this component to login view, right? And for this icon, I'd like to change it to login. And the title, let's say login. All right, so this is our view, and I change this to login. And if I reload this page, I should have let me check. So right now I have a login view here. So as you can see, you can add this view very easily, and we can start working on the content in this view. Basically, we need to add a form to this view. Okay, so let's work on this form for the login view. So here, I can add a form here. It's called view form. Okay, since we are using Viewify, and I'd like to add a ref, basically a reference to this form, and we can use it later. And if I try to submit this form, I'd like to prevent the default action here, and I'd like to submit our username or email and password to our backend so we can log in. Okay, so I'd like to call this function login. All right, and this function right now is not defined, but we are going to define it later. Maybe I can define it here, methods, and we're going to have a function called login, right? And this is our login function. So for now, I only need to console log. I'm trying to log in. Okay, so we're going to fix this later. So for now, just a placeholder here for the login function here for this form. And in this form, before we actually, I'd like to create a component here for all the form input. So because we're going to use the form input in a lot of places, and that's why we need to create maybe let me give you an example here right now. So in this router, if I need to add a input here, right, for the maybe for the email, right? type in the email, and we need to add something like this. So this is basically the standard HTML code here. But in Vuetify, we have some component we can use. So if we go to vuetify.js.com, and if I go to the UI components and go to form, where is my form? And here I have some text field, or if you go to forms, you have some examples here, as you can see. And I'd like to pick the text field, and you can pick a style here you like. So for most of the case, I prefer to use this outlined a little bit, so you can choose any of them if you like. Okay, and you can add a lot of stuff here, like let me show you. If you want to add an icon, you can add an icon, icons. So I prefer to use this one, so prepend inner icon and with outline style, and also you can pick the style you like. Okay, so let me open the code here. You know what, I'd like to make a copy of this one, or prepend inner icon. Okay, let me copy this one. And in my code, I don't want to use this field, outlined. Okay, label, this is the label, maybe for email. So this is a prepend inner icon, so I make this icon MDI. So this MDI is basically material design icon. Okay, so this is for email, and let me show you what it looks like. So if I reload the page for the login, so you will see, so you have a login like this, right? And this is login, and this is the input for you, right? So basically, I want to make this text field as a component, because this is going to be used in a lot of places. So I don't want to repeat all of this content here. Instead of doing this, I'd like to create a component called my input, so we can handle multiple use cases here. So my input is the component name, and I'd like to give this a template, and let's just make a copy of this content here, and we'll take a property here, which is called item, and the type for this item is object. Okay, so, and for this outlined, I'd like to fetch this property from the item dot outlined. If there is no outline in property in this item, I'm going to set it to true. So basically, this is basically a default setup for the outlined. And another property is called danced, not dance. And item dot dance. So if there is no dance, I'm going to set it to a false or true. So by default, I have to make it a dance. The dance is going to change. So if we check, so this is a regular one, and this is a one is danced. Basically, it's the height is a little bit lower, right? So this is this is a normal input. So if you want to save some vertical space, you can use this dance to make it a little bit lower. And for the label, it's going to come from item.label. And here, if you have a icon here, you also can use item.icon, And if there is no item, let's just set it to null. And a lot of other properties we can set. And label, if you have a placeholder, and we can set it to placeholder. Okay, and something else, let me check. And type, of course, item.type. Okay, and the most important, we need to add a v model to the item dot value, and we need to also submit to add emit for the change event. Okay, so this is about our text field. So here, if we have other input type like a select or something like that, we can handle that situations here. But right now, we just focus on this part for text input, because for our login form, we only have email input and password input, right? So that's easy. Just two use cases like this way. And I think we can have another properties here. It's called hide details. Item dot hide details false. So this is to set the default value is false. And another important is called rules. So basically, it's going to add a validation for this input. So item dot rules. So if we have the rules, I'm going to set up a rules for this data validation here. And I think all of this input can be found here. So if you check the v text field, you can find, I think you can find most of these properties here. All right. Text field. So if I go to forms, if you check the form validation, so as you can see, all of these properties you can set up like this way. So a lot of stuff you can set up. So for now, for this input, I'm going to do it like this way, right? And for our, so this is our component, and we have this component ready. Okay, I forgot this comma here. So this is my input. So we can use this component in our login form here. So instead of writing all of this code, all I need to do, I need to give it my input as a component. And I take an item which is object, and here I'm going to use form.email. Okay, so that's all I need to do. And I need to make a copy of this line, and this is a form for email and a password. So basically, I'm repeat this component 2 times, one for email and one for password, and then we should have the form created. And the last, I think I need to add a button here called v-btn, v-btn, and the type is submit button. Okay, and you can give it v-btn, and I can give it icon here. So it's called v-icon, and put it on the left, and the value for this icon is called mdi login. Okay, so v-icon, and we also can add a caption for this button, which is login. So this is the button to submit our form, right? 2 input, one for password and one for button. And I'd like to change this button to a depressed button. Depressed and block. So if I change it to block, it's going to take the full width of the screen. Okay. And before we refresh this page, I need to define this form, okay? Form data object. So I can define it here. Data is a function, and this function is going to return an object, okay? And in this object, we need to define our data, form data object. So in this form data, we need to have an email, right? And also we are going to have a password. And we need to define all of our properties we need to use in the components. If you check, we have outline, dense, label, all of this information you used here. So basically, this is basically the item for the component. So we're going to have a label property, which is email, right? And for the value, so by default it's a null, and we need to add something else, icon, MDI, email, and anything else. Since we have a lot of default configuration like the dense, we have a default value, so we don't have to pass. So if we want to override the default value, we can pass the value. Okay, and type, we need to pass a type. If you want a placeholder, you can add a placeholder. And if you want to rules, you can add rules. Okay, so I'd like to add placeholder, no placeholder. So anything else? Type, yes. Since this is email, so I'd like to add a type for email. And rules. So the rules is going to be an array of functions, okay? So we're going to check the value. So if the value is invalid, I'm going to return this is required field, or you can say email is required. So you can customize your error message for your input. So we can make a copy of this, all of this content here, and paste it here for the password. So the password here, we have value is null. So we need to change this password to password, right? And MDI lock. So this is icon, is a lock icon for the password. The type is a password, and password is required for the error message, and make it a required field. So if I reload this page, I hope I get everything correctly. Login. So boom, you have this and you have this, and you have the validation. And I'd like to give it color for this button, make it a primary button. Give it a primary. So I think it's called color of primary. If you check the buttons component here, and you can give it a block, right? So all of these properties you can set up for this button. So for the color, so color primary, and we have some. So all of this you can set it up. You can add all of these properties for this button, as you can see, depressed, something like that. So this is where I find all of this content. So I added a color for this button, a primary color for this button, and if I reload the page, I should have this form. And I think this is a form. So if I try to reload to log in here, so if I click on login, so as you can see, this function is working. I'm trying to log in, and maybe let me handle this a little bit, because I want to maybe not take the full width of this screen, because this is not looks very good for desktop. So for mobile, It looks fine. Okay, so we can handle this very easily. And let's give it a v row, repeating a v row. And I'd like to give it a v spacer, here and here. And I want to wrap all of this in a v column. Okay, v dash column. So so this is our row, and add a spacer at the left and add a spacer at the right, and all of the other content are in the middle. Okay, so I can add columns. So for small screen, not a small screen, the extra small. Okay, so the tiny screen, I'm going to take 12 columns. For small screen, I want to take 10 columns. And for media, the screen size, I'm going to take 8 columns. And for large screen, I think I'm going to take 6. Or like change it to 4, E6, 8. Maybe it's better, but we can check it out. So if I reload the page, again, difficult to home. This is weird. Why it's not in the middle? V spacer. Okay, so basically another thing, I think is because of this. So when the user is not logged in, I'd like to hide all of this navigation and this app bar. Okay, I don't want to see them because I only want to show the user this login form if the user is not logged in, right? So that's something we need to do in our store. So here, I'd like to create a state property here called user, and by default, let's set it to null. So if we don't have any user, and we can set up getters. Okay. So for the getters, we can call it is authenticated or is auth. We can create a function here called is auth, and it's going to take the states, and it's going to return state dot user. So if we have a user, we return true. If it's not, I'm going to return false. So basically, if there is no user, so here null basically means no user, and its auth is going to be false. It's authenticated, short for authenticated. So I make it shorter like this way. And if we have a user, I'm going to say is true. Okay, so this is this getter in this store. So if we have this getter here, we can use it in our component, especially like here in our the components for navbar. So basically, I'd like to hide the entire navbar, and we can map the getter here, and also we can map this user here, right? We have this user. We can either use this one, so we can say if user, if user. So if we have the user, we also can map the getters. So view x map getters, and we map is_aus from is_aus, and we can replace this user with is_aus. I think this basically works the same. All right, and we need to if the user is logged in, I think I need to hide this login, right? So that means in our for loop here, where is my loop? So for item in pages, so the page is basically our routers, our route we define here. So this is our pages, right? Home page, about page, login page. And if the path, or is my component, v4, I'd like to add a if condition here. So I need to move this, I need to add a template here. Template v4 and v if item.path is not equal to login, right? So since here we only show this if the user is authenticated. So if the user is authenticated, I'd like to hide this login page. That's why only with the path, the item path is not equal to login, I'd like to show this item here. Okay. And the list item, close this template here. Okay, I think this should fix the issue. And I'd like to add a logout button here after the light mode, because since the user, if you can see this page, that means you're already logged in. Okay, so we need to add a logout button here. So we can make a copy of this button for the so basically the mode toggle button here for the light mode or dark mode. So I make it, give a function called logout, and the icon here mdi logout, and here logout. And this function is not defined, so we can define a function here called logout. So where is methods? Add my method here. So function called logout, and I'm going to place log here just for now. Okay, I'm trying to log out. So this is a function to log out, but we're going to fix later. And now we have this setup. So if I try to reload the page, I think we have some problems because since the user is not logged in, and you will see there is no content here. And let me check if any errors. Store is not defined. Okay, something wrong with the store. We have null, we have the getters, we have the mutations. Actions. Something is wrong. Let me reload. Store is not defined. States, we have these getters. So let me check if this getters, something issue with getters. So if you do a search for view X, getters. I'm not sure if I remember it correctly. So state getters. Okay, so this is a function. Maybe I need to define it like this way. Let me change it. So getters is authenticated. Change it to a function like this. And okay, so let me reload the page. Store is not defined. So let me get rid of this. That's weird. I think I did something wrong. Okay. I think I missed a comma here. So we need to change all of this, I think. So if I reload, I think I'm going to solve the issue. So there is a comma here. Right now I have the home page, but I cannot access the nav bar navigation, right? Is that because there is no user? So if I add a user here, maybe give it a name for myself. So right now we have a user hard-coded here. So if I reload the page, I should have this application working, and we have this logout, right? So if I try to click on this logout and I'm trying to log out, that means the logout function is also working. So, and the next part, I think I need to add a router guard. So if the user is not logged in, and I should bring the users to log in to the login page, and not in this home view, right? So if there is no user, and I should show the user the login page. Okay, reload. That's weird. Strong. Okay, I think I did something wrong again. N is not defined. What is the name? No. That's pretty weird. Okay, so it's working now. So let's add the router guard so we can bring our users to the login page. Okay, so let's add the router guard. So if the user is not logged in, and we need to bring the users to our login page. So in the router here, we can add a router guard here. So let's say after each, and this takes the to from. So this is an example I'd like to show you how to add basically, let me add a user first here. So basically, this is just an example I'd like to show you how to add a path here for each page. So if I go to home page, I should have a slash like this. And if I go to users page, I'm going to have a users like this. Okay, so we can use something. So after we in that page, and then we can call a function called Google script dot, I think it's called history, history dot push. Going to push first parameter is null, second is null, and the last one is going to be 2.pass. So the pass is going to be the home, about page, or login page, something like that. Okay. So let me reload the page. So as you can see here right now, I have a hashtag / and if I go to about page, I'm going to have a hashtag about page, and so right now we don't have the login page, but we can handle it here. So we need to add another router guard, so it's called router before each, and to the parameter from to next. So basically what we're doing here, we need to check, right? We need to check if the user is authenticated or not, right? First step. So let's do a const is auth is basically is equal to router, not router, store getters is auth. Okay. So if we do a search for view router guard, we have a before, so basically router before each, we have this function here. And as you can see here, in the two basically the page you won't go to that page, right? The to.name or to.pass is not equal to login, and the user is not authenticated. I'm going to basically bring them to the login page, right? So let me copy this code here. So if to.name is not equal to, so here I'm not using name because I didn't define any name here, so we can use pass. So the pass is not equal to login, right? This is our pass. So the pass is not equal to login. So that means you want to go to home page and you want to go to about page, something like that. And if the user is not authenticated, right? And then I'm going to return next. And the next page will come to be login page, right? And else, I'm going to return next. So here I'm going to direct them to the login page, and here that means the user is already logged in, right? And we can console .log is auth is true or not. So let me reload the page. If I check the log, about, so it's auth equal to true. And what if I change this to the user to null? No, need to reload. So Vero has no view. So it's basically redirect to the login page here. And if there are some issues here in this component, I need to fix it. So I think it's in the router, and it's about this login form. So I think I didn't close a tag here. Which tag? Vero has no matching end tag. So Vero, I need to close this Vero here. All right, so let's reload this page again. Maybe let me change the default view to the dark view to false, so we can have a light view by default. So now we have this form. So here they are dense. If you want to change it to a default width height for this input, you can change it here very easily. So in the router, and you can add dense. You can set the dense to false, okay? Because this dense by default is not false. Dense is true by default. So if you change it to false, not working. Dense. Maybe reload. That's weird. Password dense. Where is my dense? Okay, so this is not, because this is false and this is true. Of course, it's always true. So this is a little bug here. So we can fix it later. So this is not a big deal here. Let's not focus on this part right now. And make sure the functionality is working. So here I'd like to say we basically add a router guard, so you cannot access other content if you're not logged in. Okay, so maybe you can add the margin to this login h1 here. So in login, let's give it a class of margin bottom 3 or 4. Give it a primary text color. So if I reload this page, okay, so it looks like a little bit nicer. And the next part I think is main, but I think is more focused on the backend because we need to handle these login functionalities here. Okay. Okay, so seems like with the front end for this login or for the authentication is already done, and we need to add the functionalities. Basically, we need to send this email and a password to our backend and to validate if they're valid or not. So if it's valid, we're going to generate a token and also basically bring the users to the home page, right? If it's not, I'm going to send an error message to the users. So let's do this part. So back to our code. And so here in this login, so we can do, so first of all, in this login function here, we need to check if the form is valid. Is form valid is equal to this refs.form validate. So remember we have a reference to this form, right? So we can use this function, we can use this validated function to validate if the form is valid or not. So if its form is not valid, I'm going to return. So I'm going to do nothing here, or we can send an error message. Okay, so only if the form is valid, we're going to call a function here called view store dispatch, and the function I'm going to call here is called login, and we need to pass an email and a password. Okay, so the email is going to be this.form.email.value, and the const password, the password goes to this.form.password password.value. Okay, so this login action is defined in our store. Okay, so right now it's not defined, so let's define this login here in our store. And we need to async function here called login, and it takes something called commit, and we're going to take the parameters here, which is basically the email and password, right? So I call it parameters. It's object. And for now, let's just console log these parameters so you can see the result. Okay, so let's reload this page. And inspect. And if I put email address here and password, so if I try to log in, as you can see, in this parameter here, I have the email and password here. So we can send this email and password to our backend, and then we can validate this email and password at our backend. So let's do this part. So in our backend, I need to create a class. And the class name is going to called app. And I'm going to all the backend, especially for the like a API call, something like that. And here I'd like to set up some default values. So this dot, I call it database, spreadsheet dot open by ID. So the ID is going to be the config dot ID or DB ID, which is not defined. I'd like to define a DB ID here. Basically the ID to a spreadsheet as database. So here I already have one here, and I need to grab this ID, okay, and put it here. So basically you need to create a spreadsheet for your, basically as a database for your application. And here I have a users table, and I have all of this information here, like I have a column for password, and I have a column for the email. Okay, so we can validate the user login authentication with this email and a password here. So that's my plan. And so to do that, so this is a link to our database, right? And I need to create a function called login here. And it takes email, password, and maybe sometimes we have a token, and we can validate if the token is valid or not. Okay, so we can handle this maybe later. So right now we can only handle password with email and password for a user login. So for our front end call, so let's call the function here const login function, right? And it's let's make it an error function. So it takes parameters from the front end, and then let's just make an instance of this application. So const app, new app, and then we can use, I'm going to return JSON string find app dot login, and I'm going to pass the parameters here. So the parameters here is basically a string-find JSON object. So I'm going to parse these parameters, and I'm going to pass it into this app, or you can do it like this. So const data equal to app login, right? After we log in, we're going to return something in this data. Okay, we're going to return something like the user information and the token, right? And we need to return this data as a string. So basically, I'm going to string find this data. Okay. So this is a login function, and we need to handle all of this information here. So to make it simple, I'd like to give you a very quick demo here. So if password is equal to, maybe say password. So I just want to give you a very quick demo. So if not, I'm going to return something like return object success false, right? And the message invalid credentials. Okay, so if the password is not equal to password, so we need to use this email to find a user from our table, right? And we can grab this password and then compare it with this password, which is assigned from the front end, and we can compare it. But for now, I just do a very quick demo, so I compare this password with this password. So else, so if it does match, I'm going to return. Of course, we need to return user, so give a name or Ashton here, and we also have a token here. It says token here is password for now, but we're going to fix it later. So we're going to return a success, go to true, and a message, you can say welcome. So you can send a welcome message to the users, right? So if its password is matched, I'm going to return something. And if it's not matched, So this is basically our simplified login function here. And we can use this function to test our front-end code. Okay, so if I do a console log here, and I say password parameter is equal to email, go to empty, and password equal to something like abcd, and I can test here. So if I try to log in here, okay. Since we are trying to access the data at our backend spreadsheet, and we need to do the authorization for this API. Okay. This is just, I have to say, it's just very stupid. I think it's not stupid. It's basically, so it's a most easiest way to show you how to do this kind of authentication. And this is not very secure, I have to say. You cannot save the password like this in your database. But in this demo, I think it's easier for you to understand the process. Parameters. So let me comment this out first. So as you can see, it's not success invalid password. So if I put a password here and try to log in, and it returns users, right? User object like this. So let me get rid of this line, and get rid of this line as well. So we can, in our front end, we can do something like in this store. So before we do that, I'd like to create another file called utilities. utils, okay. Utils, right? So basically all our utility functions, we can add it here and add a script tag because I want to add some functions here. And let's do an object here called utils. Make it object. And the first function I'd like to add it here is a request function. Okay, so this request function is basically it's like fetch API, something like that. So basically, I'm using this request function to send our front end request to our backend. Okay, so this function is going to take a function name. So basically, which function you want to call at our backend. So for our login, we need to call a function called login, right? And we need to pass some parameters here. So if there is no parameters, I'd like to put an empty object here to the backend. And this function is going to be an async function. Okay, async. And it's going to return promise. And this promise function is going to take a resolve and reject. This part is kind of tricky, so you maybe need to spend some time on this function here. So I'm going to call the function here, Google script.run. And here we can have two situations here. Even the code to the backend is success or is failed, right? So basically, if we success handler, can do something, and with failure handler, and here is going to call this function. So we pass this function name here, and we call this function with the parameters here. But we need to string find this parameter. So string find JSON, string find these parameters, because we send the parameters as a string and pass the parameters here. Okay, so we're going to have some response from the backend. So response. So if the call to the backend is successful, and we need to resolve this response. But remember, the response from the backend is a string as well, it's a JSON object. So we need to parse this response. Okay, so this is our resolve function, and if an error is here, we need to reject error. So basically, we reject this error. So this is our request function. So we can use this request function in our code. So before we use it, we need to add this tag to our code. So basically, in our index file, I'd like to bring this utils in our utils, okay? And then we can use it anywhere in our code. So our store, we have this login function here, right? And we need to use a try catch block error console.log error. So here, anything I need to do, I need to call a function utils.request. So I need to request this function called login, right? And need to pass the parameters, which basically these parameters, to the backend and const response. So we're going to return a response object, right? And I need to await this since this is an async function, and we can get something like this from the backend. Remember, we have a success or message or a user. So if you check the backend for the login function, we can either return this or this, right? And if its success is true, we should get a user object. If it's false, we get an error message, right? So in our store, and first of all, I'd like to change this loading state to true, since we are trying to log in, right? And we can use this commit, and we can use start loading. Okay. And after if there is an error here, we console log this error, right? Or error the message, not message. And we need to stop the loading, or your application is still loading, right? And in the same way, we also need to stop the loading here if we get the result. So if it's not a success, if it's not a success, it means something error. So we can console the log, not lg, log the message, right? And else, that means we are logged in successfully. So I need to update this user, and I need to create a mutation here called update state. State is take state as a parameter, and here I have an object here, have a key and a value. Okay, so state key equal to value. So basically I can update any states here. So if I want to update the user, so here that means we have a user, right, successfully get from the backend. We can commit, can call this function called update state. So it's this mutation we defined here. So update state, and then we pass a key value pair. So key is user, right? And the value is going to be this user object. So we pass this user to this user state. So we update our user. So this is when we logged in successfully. Okay, so I think that's almost everything we need to do for this login. So it's simplify. I basically simplified the process a little bit, but the main process is basically covered here. So if I try to reload, and if I put email here, any email, it doesn't matter because we only validated the password. So if I put a password, and as you can see, I can access the home page, but there's something issue there because it did not so basically here, after we logged in successfully, we need to use the router push to home page, right? And I also need to define a function called async logout. Remember, we have a logout commit and parameters, and we can make a copy of this. the only thing we need to change here, we don't need to have this user, I think, and then we need to call a request called logout, and this is the parameter we are passing to the backend. And if we log out successfully, I'd like to update the user to null, right? So I'm going to get rid of the user and push it back not to home page to login page. So this is our logout function, and we need to handle this at the backend as well. So our backend, first of all, in our application here, we need to add a logout function, logout, and it takes token. Okay, so right now I think logout, I'm not going to handle here, so I'm going to return the success as a message here directly. But we need to do more stuff. So success true. So you've been logged out. So basically, the token, basically from the front end, when we are doing a logout, we need to basically need to remove this token from our backend. Okay. So for now, I'm not handling this token here in our application. So I want to simplify the process a little bit, but this is the extra work you need to do. Okay. So this is our logout function, and we can make a copy of this login. And logout basically replace this function with logout, and we basically return this data to our front end and the logout. So this logout is the function we need to call at our in our store, right? We send a request with this function logout and pass the parameters here. So remember, our logout function is defined here in our navbar. So if I do a search for navbar, I have a logout function here. And let's say const token. So right now we don't have any token here. So let's just say token is a token. But you need to basically restore the token in the users, right? And here you have this user.token, or you can get the token from your local storage. Get a token from local storage, okay? And this token is saved when you are logged in, okay? But I didn't handle it in this example. So this is the token, and you can, like we did here in our login function. So you basically you can call this store dispatch, and the function is logout, and you pass the parameter, which is the token, right? And here you can call this logout function, and in our store, you're going to take this parameter and call the backend function and log the user out. And if it's successful, we're going to update the user to a null. And if we have the token saved in our local storage, we need to remove the local storage as well. And we're going to push router back to the login. Okay, so that's the basic, the logic, the whole process for the authentication. So if I reload the page, so let me do a wrong example with a wrong password. So as you can see, this error message, invalid credentials, and let me do a correct one. Email is not matter. So password is the correct password. So if I try to log in, and it's bring me back to the home page, right? And if I try to log out, and boom, I go back to our login. right? So that means the basic, so here, this part is basically show you the basic process to do the authentication in your application. Okay, you have a login, you have a logout, and you validate your credentials at the backend, and you send some message to the front end, and you basically process your application like this way. Okay, so that's a very important part, and I simplified this process a little bit. I also need to add the token to the storage, local storage. So after you logged in, if you refresh your page, you won't lose your credentials. You won't lose your token. Okay, you have that token, and you can revalidate your token. With that token, you need to validate. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that in next part. So I think I need to do that in the next part because this is too long, maybe for you guys. And in the final part of this video, maybe I need to do some improvement for the front end, like a progress bar and some error message or something like that. Okay, so let's improve our front end a little bit because we are trying to do the login here. If I click on this button, I should disable all of this content here, right? And also, I'd like to add a bar here, a progress bar here, so you can see a loading, something like that. And we also need to add an error message pop up, something like that. So if there is any issues or basically an error message alert for the from end users, right? So let's do this part. So first of all, when the application is loading, so if we check our store, we have a global loading state. And if this loading is true, I'd like to disable all of these components, like email, a password, or login button. So first of all, in our component, let's do a compute it. I'd like to grab the loading property. So view x map state. I'd like to map the loading from our store. Okay, loading, and don't forget this comma. It's caused serious problems. Okay, so loading, and I need to do another properties here. So loading equal to item.loading or loading. So basically, if this loading is true, I'm going to disable not loading. Disabled. I'm going to add a disabled property to this text input field. Item is loading or the loading is true. Okay, so this is the first part. So if I try to reload this page, if I try to do submit, it won't work because it's not valid. So as you can see, this now the input is disabled, right? But this button is not disabled. So let's do this as well for the button. So maybe I need to make a copy of this, compute it, and go back to our router for the login form. So let's do a login form. And remember this button here. I think we already have. Okay, we don't have that computed, so I just copied the computed. Basically get the loading probably from our store. And we only added disabled. And put the loading here. And you even can do something like loading here. So let me show you the Viewify. If you add a loading property here for this button, if I do loading, so you have a loading button like this. So this is a solution if you prefer to use that way. So for me, I like to disable it. when the form is loading, right? Disable it. So right now it's basically disabled. And for the loading animation, I'd like to add the progress bar here. So to do that, let's go to Beautify.js. I cannot remember the progress bar. So let me go to the UI component and the progresses, and I think I need to use something like this. Yeah, something like this. So here you have examples, something like this, basically. So let me grab the code. Where is my progress? Okay, so this is the progress bar I need to use. Just make a copy of this view progress linear and go back to our code here, and I need to add it here in our login. Activate it. So if loading is activated, absolute. For this bottom, I'd like to change to top, and for the color, I'd like to change it to primary color. Okay, something wrong with my network, I think. What's the matter? I need to reload. Let me check if Google is on service. Or YouTube. Okay, it's back. Let's reload the page. So, there is a interrupt network. So in our component, I hope I didn't lose something a lot. So let me check in the router. Let's find the login view, and computed is here. That's good news. And button to top, and change this color to primary. So we can, what's the matter? Cannot save it. That's pretty weird. Okay, there is a internet issue. Not good. It's back again. Sorry about that. So in the router login view, it's not saved top, and the color is the primary. So now it's saved. So if I reload the page, and add something like this, and if I try to load, so as you can see, I have this this bar is loading. So this is pretty good. This is what I want. Okay. And I also want to add a message, basically alert message to the end users. So as you can see, there is a message here called invalid credentials. So I'd like to show this to the end users. So we can do it with multiple ways. But in Beautify, we have something called snack bar. So basically something like this. So maybe snack bar or timeout snack bar. So we can use this snack bar here, and then we can make a copy of this snack bar. And I'd like to make it a component. Okay, so let's do const my snack bar view component my snack bar, and give it a template which is copied from the example here. Okay, my snack bar. Okay, so the model. So here we also need to have some computed. So we need to define global snack bar, and we get it from our, let's say, snack bar. Snack, I cannot spell this snack bar. Let's say view x map state, and map it from snack bar. So we have some properties here: snack bar show and timeout. We can say snack bar timeout, or we can give it 3000 milliseconds for the timeout. So for the text, I'd like to use maybe a HTML here for the snack bar message, and get rid of this. And here is the button to close or show to, or we can use store.commit close snack bar, and this is button to close it, and the color, let's say primary, and I think we also can give it a color. Let me check. Not sure if we can color the snack bar. It's always like this color. Okay, we have a color thing. This is purple. Okay, we can add a color here. So let me add a color for this snack bar. So color is basically the snack bar color, or if there is no color assigned, we just put a primary color or dark. So this is our snack bar, and we need to define our snack bar in our state. So loading name snack bar, so which basically is a object. We have the message, which is null. We have the color, by default is primary, and we have timeout. We have a default value, so you can define it or not. It's not a big deal. So 3000. What else do we have? Color, timeout, message, show. Okay, that's very important. Show by default is false. So this is our snack bar, and I'd like to add this snack bar globally to our application, so we can use it anywhere. So that means we can add a snack bar here in our application. add here my snack bar. Okay. And in our store, I like to add another mutation here called show snack bar state. I'm going to take message color, or we can take an object snack bar. And snack bar dot show equal to true. And state dot snack bar is equal to this snack bar. Okay, going to update this. And also we need to define function to hide or close snack bar. So to close it, we all need to do state snack bar dot show equal to false. So this function close snack bar, I think I use it here in the component commit to close the snack bar. So in our store, login. So every time if we have an error message here, I'd like to, instead of log this out, I'd like to commit. We can show snack bar, and we can send a message like this way, error.message, and then we can give it a color of error. Okay, so this is for the error message, and here as well. And you also can send a successful message. So if it's successfully, this message is this message. And you can change the color to success for if it's a success snack bar. Okay. Error. And we can get rid of this stop loading here. So we need to, every time we show a snack bar, we can stop the loading. So states loading false. So show the snack bar, and then we stop the loading. Okay. So in this way, we don't have to. So remember, every time you call this show snack bar, that means this loading status is going to be changed to false. So this is about the login, and about the logout. We can make a copy of this to here and here, but this message has to be replaced. This error message has to be placed with this one. Get rid of this message, and the successful message. Success, color success, logout, and update stage error. Okay, and get rid of this stop loading, start loading. Okay, I think this can help us to improve the. Let me check if I did anything error. So to help us to improve the user experience a little bit, is false. Okay, so let's do. Okay, I have welcome here, but that not looks like a snack bar. That's weird. Let me check. Not the footer. Where is my snack bar? So if I try to log out, you've been logged out. But this is not what I'm looking for. Something wrong with the snack bar. Maybe component snack bar. Let me get rid of this color timeout. Template. Color primary text. Bind attributes. Let me check. Snack bar. Usage. Text. Snack bar is false. Timeout 2000. Bind text. Okay, let's replace this VHTML with snack bar message. Not sure if this is the issue. Okay, so now it's working, and the invalid credential, right? You can close it. And if I do, maybe I need to change the color for this. Change it to white. VBTM. So, So encrypted credentials looks fine. And if I put my name here, not my name, email address, and put a card password. So if I do a login, and as you can see, got a message, welcome. And if I do log out, it's going to log you out here. Okay, so that improves this a lot. Okay, and also I also want to add this progress bar. Let me find progress. I think it's in the progress bar. I need to add this progress bar to the app bar. Okay, so when I'm logging out, where is my nav bar? So here, in our bar here, I'd like to add a progress bar here as well. Okay, because I want to show this, but I need to change this to bottom. And for this app bar, I'd like to add a flat properties to this app bar because I want to get rid of that. Let me show you what I mean. I don't want to have this shadow here. Okay, and I also want to show. So if I try to log out, I don't have a loading animation here, right? I want to add a progress bar there too. I'm sure we have this loading here. Okay, so if I try to reload the page, because I did some change here in the code, and blah, 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 login, and now I don't have this bar here. And you also can change the drawer. By default is false, so I like to change it to true. So I'd like to change the drawer by default. Reload the page. So right now the credentials, the token are not saved to local storage. So every time you refresh the page, it's going to bring you to the login page again. Okay. So that's maybe the issue we can fix later in the next part. So let's put password. So now we're in home page, and if I try to log out, I also have this animation here, and then we can log out. Invalid password. So maybe final thing I'd like to share here. So after you log in, you can use the user information. So I'd like to add my name here, replace automate everything with my name, or I can update this app name with my name. So you can go to the navbar, and here you find the name, and you only replace it with user.name. So let me try it here. So the email is not a matter. So as you can see, I have my name here. So I think that's almost it for this video. And as you can see at the backend, I actually didn't use the data at our backend here, okay? Maybe that's the next part for this project, and I need to improve this a little bit so we can use the users, the actual users and password, and we can log them in with the data in this spreadsheet. And you also can try to do it, because you all need to do is add this backend file, you need to handle this password. You need to create another function to find a user with this email address, and then you compare this user's password with this password you get from the front end. So the process, basically structure, the basic structure of this process is already set up, and the only thing you need to do, you need to improve the functionalities, okay? And also for the front end, since the token is not saved to our local storage, so every time you reload the page, you need to log in again. So that's the problems we can solve maybe in the next part. And you also can try it. It won't break the tool, and that's the way you can learn, okay? So I think that's it for this video, and I think this is kind of a long video, I have to say, but and you can see this video is the only functionalities we did here is about the authentication, and I didn't even add the backend, the real backend data. We didn't even use it. So I basically built the basic structure and the basic process you need to do in your application. So yes, project like this costs time. And if you want to learn the basics, I think this is a very good example for you guys. And this is not only for AppScript, and it also works in other web applications and maybe for other mobile application. So the logic is similar. Okay, so that's it for this part, and I'm going to see you in next part. Bye bye.